How's it going, everybody? This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, coming to you live on this Wednesday night. Giannis and the Bucks storm to their first title in 50 years. Can the Yankees continue their post-All-Star break success? And the latest on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, Nick DeLuca, Kayla Wenzel, and Chase Doyen. Alex Wohl's our producer for the next 90 minutes right here on Twitter. Kayla, good to see you again because it's been a little while. And getting the opportunity to watch the conclusion of the NBA Finals yesterday, I'm loving what I'm seeing for the city of Milwaukee and the Bucks, all the excitement of winning a title in 50 years. We knew it was going to be an outstanding reaction because Phoenix hadn't won one either. So some fan base was going to be really excited. The other was going to be very disappointed. But it felt like more than just a championship to me to see Giannis break through, score the 50, play as well as he did for a guy that had been doubted as much as he had. It was really a sight to see, perhaps more than just your average championship.
No, I agree. I mean, well, for starters, hi, Nick. It's lovely to be back here with you.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, but it was so much fun to see. I mean, like, they did like a giant pan of everybody in Milwaukee. I don't know. They were in some park or something outside the stadium. I don't know. And it was absolutely insanity out there. I mean, it was 60,000 people, I think they said, all celebrating in the streets. And it just, to win, especially in Milwaukee, I mean, that energy must have just been unreal. So I think that it obviously meant a lot to the city, and it meant a lot to Giannis to be able to do that with the city. He said 2014 that he wouldn't rest until he brought the championship home to Milwaukee, and he delivered that promise. He really did do that. And I think that for them, it was such a special moment. I mean, you could see his tears in his eyes after it happened and everything. It really was an incredible game, and it was an incredible series, a whole journey to get there. So it was so much fun to watch. And I definitely think it means the whole world to Milwaukee right now. I'm sure they're still celebrating.
And those to me are two things that need to be broken down a bit separately here. But as you look at the Milwaukee Bucks as an organization in a small market to win their first title in 50 years and to do it the way they did, it wasn't through stars. It wasn't that for some reason Kevin Durant decided he wanted to go play in Milwaukee. No, it was a guy that they drafted and developed and then built around. And there was a lot of criticism about the way that they went about building around Giannis for the first 5 or 6 years that he had really established himself. And then to see them put together the right supporting cast and see Chris Middleton burst onto the scene the way he did. I thought he was incredibly impressive. And of course, Giannis sealing away the finals MVP with 50 points in a closeout game 6. You're not going to give it to somebody else. But Chris Middleton was extraordinarily deserving, especially with what he did early on in that series. And that, to me, is something that's very interesting because I don't feel like Milwaukee played its best basketball games 1 through 4. They really were able to come on games 5 and 6. But to see them be able to win those 2 games at home, and that's what Phoenix, and we'll get to Phoenix and all of that stuff as we go along tonight. But that I think is going to be what they're kicking themselves about, the opportunities that were missed in games 3 and 4 to take control of the series because you're up 3-1. You're in a really good spot, as history would tell you for the most part, assuming you're not the Golden State Warriors. But at the end of the day, it was just really interesting to see how they were able to overcome the adversity, how Giannis is a guy who has always been criticized for not having the jump shot, for not being able to shoot the free throws. He goes, 17 of 19 from the free throw line yesterday. So just to see him do what he did in such a big moment, and then to see all of it come into fruition. Mike Budenholzer, a guy who, had they lost to Brooklyn, might be on his way out. I think that that's not ridiculous to say. Might be fair to say, not 100% sure how they would have played that and how that would have gone. It's impossible to say, but it would have been close. And that was a guy who would have been on the fence for his job. And to see him after the frustrations of the playoffs of old in Atlanta come through as well, this was really a breakthrough title for Giannis, for their coaching staff, for Chris Middleton, and for the entire organization.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kayla, go ahead.
No, Chase, I want to hear from you. Tell me everything.
And Chase, how are you today?
Nick, I am good. Thank you for asking. No, I couldn't agree more. Like I was so wrong about Giannis. I think one of the last videos I did, I was so critical of Giannis that he didn't have the gem shot. He didn't have the extra gear he needed. He didn't have the KD next level or the Steph Curry next level. The entire game 6 last night, I was proved completely wrong from ball drop. I couldn't believe it. He's amazing. Like, they always talk about his work ethic, and it really shined. And I do like the fact that he's been there for 8 years. I didn't realize how long he's actually been there with Chris Middleton and all the ups and down years they had. But when you're talking earlier about the small market, I think it's good for the NBA because there's always a big, anytime there's a big free agent coming up with lower want to be traded or not want to be traded, you go to the Heat or the Lakers. But it's nice. What if you want to go to Milwaukee? It completely adds a different mix to small market teams. So I love the fact that the Bucks won. I love when they, like you said, Kayla, they win at home. There's 60,000 people outside. It's just bedlam. They waited 50 years for that championship. It's just well deserved. Absolutely.
I think it's also really encouraging, and a good point that you brought up there, Chase, for some of those small market teams just to believe that they can do that. And it's difficult. There's no bones about this being a more difficult path, as Giannis alluded to in his post-game presser about he wasn't going to a super team. He wasn't going to join forces. And it's difficult, when you don't have the New York market, which hasn't borne a ton of fruit recently, but when you don't have the New York market or Los Angeles or, pick whatever it is, Golden State, to be able to set your guys up in San Francisco, it's tough. How are you attracting players to Sacramento or to Cleveland or to Detroit or to Milwaukee? But they are proving, at least in this finals, that it can be done, that you can draft your guys, develop your guys, and come away with a championship. And I think that is a reminder that a lot of the NBA needed, because we had a lot of, you go in, you build your team, then you got to win through free agency and get that star and get those 2 stars. And it's not to say that Milwaukee didn't have the stars. They do. And it's still difficult to draft those guys. I mean, Giannis is a once-in-a-generation fall to you in the draft. But at the same time, it can be done. And I think that is hopeful for the rest of the NBA, because there's a lot of top-heavy champions in the last few years. And then when you turn around and with the knowledge say, yeah, we can build this if we do this the right way, I think is really encouraging for the rest of the National Basketball Association.
I agree. And I think especially for the NBA, I'll admit it, I'm not the biggest NBA fan out here, but every time I feel like I have watched, there's such I don't know if stagnant is the right word that I'm looking for, but there are the same types of teams who you see year in and year out, and they kind of are always your staples. They're always kind of there. They're hanging around. And so I think that made this championship special. And we'll talk about this, I think, more with the Suns, that things had to break a very certain way for this type of championship to really come to fruition. And I think that's what made it more exciting, because these are 2 teams. I mean, the Suns haven't been there in a long time. The Bucks haven't won for 50 years. So I think that these were 2 teams that they changed up the market. Things switched. You didn't have those big superstars that you almost always have in the NBA. And I think that makes it more intriguing as a fan. For me as a viewer, I like seeing different teams and different players that are not the same guys I hear about all the time. Obviously, no offense to LeBron or anything. He's incredible. But I like to learn about these other smaller market teams, these other people who are not often in this consideration and in this conversation, period. So I definitely think that for this type of championship to have gone the way that it did is just going to reinvigorate the NBA in a way.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. I feel the exact same way. I truly believe that this is good for the NBA, because free agency is always so predictable every year. But with this win, I feel like an actual big free agent could want to go to Milwaukee, or could want to go to even the Thunder, so to speak, or smaller market teams. So I agree with you on that, Kayla.
And I think that it's important, again, just with the knowledge for the organizations, and it's going to promote some of the drafting and the importance on that, and the importance on homegrown talent that I think has been lacking a little bit at times throughout the NBA, because some teams are sitting there and with the knowledge that they can't attract this big time free agent or haven't had the success, will just blow up their roster and say, we're going to figure it out and we'll just do whatever it is that comes to mind. And I think that may sway some teams away from it. And I don't know. Again, there is still an element of this is a once in a lifetime type of championship, in that it's very unique, and you're not going to get on the regular have guys like Giannis fall to you, or to have Chris Middleton fall in your lap and see those things and those guys develop in that way. But I do think that it's very encouraging. And I find this to be an interesting angle to this conversation. And this is the way I want to steer it a little bit. I feel like, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree, that this championship just means more to Giannis and of course to the organization, but to Giannis as the main cog and the main superstar on the team leading them to a championship than it had for anyone in the last 5, 10, 15 years. And I think that for me is at least safe to say. You're watching the NBA Finals and LeBron lift a trophy last year. Yes, it's nice. You're always building the resume argument with MJ, and he's got to get to a 4th or a 5th title, and then we can really talk about who's the greatest of all time. But I don't know that it proved to anyone that LeBron is a great player, or we learned something new about LeBron that we didn't already know, or we learned something new about Kevin Durant playing with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson that we didn't know. And maybe the best example, or the closest example, is the Toronto Raptors with Kawhi Leonard. But even then, I think it's also fair to point out there were some injuries that broke the right way for Toronto that had they gone otherwise, you might be having a different conversation there too. And we also knew how great Kawhi was as a guy who came in and had already won a finals MVP. Giannis was, I think the closest thing to this might be 2012 LeBron. And it's not in the finals of that year, but that game 6 against the Celtics, when it was put up or shut up time. And I don't know that Giannis was quite to that point, but it was, can this guy win in the finals? Like, are the Bucks going to have to blow this thing up? Is it viable to have Giannis as your number one player? And he's going to be a guy who can lead you to a championship. And that was such a question mark going in. And for him to be able to answer that in the way that he did, this championship to me means more for the Bucks and for Giannis than it has for anyone in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. The more to him than anyone in the last 10 years, maybe. I don't know that I'd go that far.
From a championship, from a star player resume perspective, I don't know.
I think player resume, pretty darn. I think that maybe like supplemental. I think supplemental players, it might also, this like championships might mean more to them than like the Giannis. But I think like on this level, if we're just talking star players, probably. I think that this elevates him more than it elevates anybody else. Like I already saw a post on Instagram, like comparing him to like Michael Jordan already. And that hasn't really happened to him in his career fully since like before this occurred. So I definitely think that it has meant a lot more to him than it would LeBron. Like, I agree with that. Like, I think that this is something that's a greater deal and it's going to impact his career further. But I'm going to push back a little bit, Nick, and say I wouldn't say it means the most out of everybody.
That's fair, but I think it does. I'll disagree with you. That's okay.
I actually had to side with you on this one, Nick. I genuinely like it does so much. It does so much for him. I mean, he 2-time MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and he's always left off top 10 lists of NBA players all the time. And this finally is a championship that, like, you just see it on his face. They won, just tears everywhere. There's a shot of him looking for his wife and his kid, and you just have this over sense of joy for him. And like, I have to agree with you, Nick. I genuinely feel like it means more to Giannis than most as of late. Because LeBron, he was scouted since middle school. Like, you knew it was coming. But Giannis, 12th overall pick, years and years of futility with the Bucks. Chris Middleton, you never know what he was going to do. And then now all of a sudden he's in that conversation again of top 5 players in the league, of top 10 players. And he rightly deserves it. He really does.
And Giannis is the 3rd player in NBA history before age 26 or at age 26 to win an NBA Finals and also be a two-time MVP. LeBron nor Michael Jordan were able to accomplish that feat. So he's in pretty elite company there. And I'm not comparing him yet because Giannis still has a long way to go, and I think we all know that. But it's just so impressive to see him do what he did, and especially for a guy that's just the range of the way that the playoffs could have gone for him, I think is what does it for me, because I don't think it's unreasonable for the Bucks to have thought about blowing it up had they had another early playoff exit this year. I think that they were teetering on that. Certainly a potential coaching change, and I don't know that if you are Milwaukee that you're in a position to get rid of Giannis just because you're not going to attract that type of star. So you just can't get rid of that guy. But then you're thinking about Giannis really is a tier 2 guy. He's not on that level. And to see him rise to the occasion the way that he did was really impressive. And I think that to me, it resonates in a way that the best example for me is that if LeBron had stayed with Cleveland and been able to eventually push through and not gone to Miami and won, that's what I think Giannis just did. And I don't know if that makes it 5 times more impressive, 10 times more impressive. You can answer the multiplication for me, but I think it's more impressive. Now, is he a better player than LeBron? Of course not. He's got a long way to go. But he mentioned it in his post-game press conference, and he's 100% right. He went a route and had success in a way that almost nobody in the NBA has had. Everybody has jumped ship. Everybody is looking for the best free agent destination to put themselves in a position to win a championship, and people are not staying with the teams that drafted them. And for Giannis to break through in the way that he did is just that is special. And I think that to me elevates him even another notch as opposed to some of the other champions that we saw, because it is difficult to stay in Milwaukee and to finally find a way to win that championship. And he did that. He didn't run from the challenge. There are other guys who haven't run from the challenge. Damian Lillard, to this point, comes to mind, but he hasn't been able to get past the Western Conference Finals and getting swept there. That was the most success that he had. So Giannis to stick with it and have success, that's pretty darn impressive.
I agree. I mean, I definitely think that his loyalty to Milwaukee and his loyalty to that team and to building a foundation that can be there for years to come, I mean, it's 1000% something to be applauded. And it's obviously something that I think we said how much this means to Milwaukee. That makes it mean so much more, is the fact that they've gotten to watch him grow. They've gotten to see him develop as a player, as a person, as a man. Like, they really have worked together like this whole for years. And so I think that definitely is something that's special about him. It'll be interesting to see how his career, like the trajectory of his career continues, if this is a trait that he kind of keeps with and he tries to keep remaining loyal to team, or if as he kind of finds more success, he maybe can goes towards places where he will have that success. So I think that's kind of interesting, because he may start like this, but he's gotten that taste of NBA championship, and that might be something that he will follow anywhere to go and get. So I don't know. I'm not going to speak to his character about that or anything, but I think will be something to watch. Definitely.
It's going to be interesting to see where he goes. It's always funny to see how players who win their first championship, where they go. I think he's going to stay in Milwaukee for a long time. Like, the fact that he stayed there for 8 years and he won a championship and it was all of his hard work finally paid off.
But is now the work done? Do you think he'll stay and he wants another, or is the work done in Milwaukee and he's going to go do some work somewhere else?
I think he's going to stay. Personally, I think because people doubted him for so long, if he's going to win a championship in Milwaukee, this is probably sweet. But can you imagine how he's going to feel if the Bucks win again? Maybe not next year, maybe not repeat, but 2 years from now, and it's pretty much the same chord. He wins again. It will really do a lot for him.
I think there is something to be said for being able to be marketed in the way that he can be in Milwaukee and be that star and the guy that stuck with that small market team. And he seems to really love the area and connect with the fans in Milwaukee. I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay there for the rest of his career, just because of the bond that appears to be there with the Milwaukee fan base and Giannis Antetokounmpo, because it's really impressive and it appears genuine. It really felt real when you're watching him get interviewed and the way that he was interacting with the fans after winning the championship. And then you got him in Milwaukee today trying to get the chicken nuggets from Chick-fil-A for life. I mean, he's just living the life in Milwaukee, and I would be surprised to see him give that up. Now, of course, there is a limit to this and how things play out down the road, and jump the gun a little bit on where I wanted to take this, and we'll get there in just a moment. But when you look at the way things will unfold from here, is there a potential for Milwaukee to go on a run? Is this a team that was fortunate to catch the Phoenix Suns, who were a little bit inexperienced, Chris Paul perhaps not at 100% health, and to find their way to an NBA championship in an East that saw Kyrie Irving hurt, James Harden not at 100%, and Kevin Durant struggling to keep the Nets afloat, and Philadelphia implode the way that they did in the semifinals with Atlanta. They avoid them. Now, I'm not going to criticize it, the Bucks for not playing Philadelphia because Atlanta beat them. It's how the game works. I saw that and I was like, no, you play who comes up on your schedule here. But I don't know that this is a team that you feel like is in a position to run off 4 or 5 championships in the next 10 to 15 years. I don't know how you feel about it, but then it adjusts the conversation for how do we feel like Giannis approaches things going forward.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a fair point. I mean, like we have said before, that this was a once in a lifetime sort of championship. Like, I don't think that the Suns, and we'll talk about this, I guess, a little later, but I'm not sure the Suns will be there again. You know what I mean? Like, things went very specifically and they got a lot of lucky breaks. And so I'm not necessarily sure that this type of situation is going to be around. So like, if they were not playing the Suns and if they were playing somebody like the Nets or something else, like, would it have been different? And I think that that's a fair question. I think it could have been, but that being said, I feel like this team still has a strong core that is going to just continue to build. And I think that, well, repeat championship is hard, and I'm not saying they're going to do that. I think that they're going to continue to be competitive as next season rolls around. And I think that with this newfound confidence in themselves, I think that this is going to really propel them and carry them through and push them towards still being a pretty strong team and a strong force to compete with.
Yeah, for them to continue to make a run, they have to make just not a lot of changes. Like you said, Kayla, they have a very strong core, but I guess for me personally, I have to see more of Jrue Holiday, because there's going to be games where Middleton is inconsistent. We've seen that in his career. And there's going to be games where Giannis just sometimes the motor isn't going to run or he's hurt. And you need the other big star in that team, and sometimes he just hasn't been able to provide the extra scoring touch. Defensively, yes, that's great, but there's so many the NBA is so loaded these days, especially when you get that deep in the playoffs, you need another guy. And I don't know, they just need a couple personnel changes. I think they got it.
All right, I want to nail down what we think here. Next 5 years, can the Bucks win another title, yes or no?
5 years?
5 years.
Just within the 5 years or in 5 years?
Within the 5 years.
Parameters. Within
the 5 years.
Okay, I'm going to go with yes. I think that they'll win. Hypothetically, this is very far prediction for me, but I'm going to give them in maybe 2 or 3 years, I could see them coming around again.
Okay.
Hold me to it. Someone call me in 2024 or something like that.
I think Alex Wolves is rolling right now. You got that, Alex? Okay, we're good. We've got it on video, so we're all set. Yeah.
If they're here, I want money out of it. If they win the championship, and I called it right now, I would like to see something come out of that.
I got them in year 4 and year 5. I genuinely think they could win again, but not anytime soon. I think it's just, there's probably going to be another team that makes a surprise run like Milwaukee Bucks. It's going to win. I think LeBron's getting another ring. So year 4, year 5, I think they got it.
So speaking of teams that we think will be a couple of years before returning to championship contention, if they do it all, let's flip over to the losers last night and the Phoenix Suns. After a 2-0 lead in the series. They lose 4 in a row. And as mentioned, did not feel like Milwaukee through games 1, 2, 3, and 4 played their best basketball. The Suns had the opportunity to win game 3 in a close one, certainly had their opportunities in game 4 to go up 3-1 and really take a hold of this series. They were not able to do that. And of course, Milwaukee going on the 4 straight wins and onto their first title in 50 years. But this is a tough pill to swallow for the Phoenix Suns. And of course, it always is. But when you are a team that loses in the fashion that they did with the way that they are constructed, there, to me, is a significant question. And perhaps I gave it away a little bit, and I'll love to get your guys' thoughts on this in a moment. I'm not sold on Phoenix being able to return to this spot anytime soon. And I loved what I saw from Devin Booker in the postseason. He was a gamer and he was outstanding. And he really, I think, put a lot of people on notice who didn't really understand how good Devin Booker was coming into these playoffs as a guy who hadn't been there before. But Chris Paul is not getting any younger. The contract is significant. He's going to be a free agent in this summer. And now it's about, can they potentially lure him back? Of course, has a very good relationship with the Suns coach Monty Williams, but will that be enough to even bring him back? And even if they do, is this a team that still has a championship window open with presumably the Clippers returning to full strength, with the Lakers getting Anthony Davis and LeBron, who clearly was not healthy in that first round series, back at full strength? So I'm interested to see what the landscape of the West looks like, because I'm not so sure that this is just your average finals loss for the Phoenix Suns, in a way that, okay, the Golden State Warriors lost to Cleveland. They were coming back the next year. We knew that was going to happen. I think it might be a while for Phoenix to see if they can build something back up again, because I don't think that DeAndre Ayton, as well as he played in these playoffs, is a viable number 2 to just pair with Devin Booker and say, we are definitely getting to the finals. They will need another piece, and I don't know that it's Chris Paul with the age, the contract, and whether he'll even be here next year.
Yeah, honestly, I don't want this to sound like patronizing or anything, but my heart really goes out to Chris Paul. Like, I truly feel bad for Chris Paul a lot of the times. Like, I just feel like his career has been so unlucky, and he's finally here at the finals, and this was his opportunity, and it slipped away again. And like you said, he's not getting any younger. I think he's like 36 or like 37. Like
37.
He's getting up there for sure. And so like these opportunities, they're few and far between for him now. And I don't know that he is still the Suns guy. I don't think that he is. I think that at this point in his career, he's not always very healthy. Like, I think that there's inconsistencies just in his overall general health. And so I feel like I don't know that he's the one for them. And if he's not, and they're going somewhere else, where are they going? Who are they going for? And is it going to be enough? Because then once Chris Paul leaves, or if he leaves, you're kind of still rebuilding a little bit again. Unless you get some superstar, you're still kind of trying to build back a core group. And I think that for them, this was their chance. This was their opportunity. And I think it's going to be a while before we see them again. I'm not saying that they're not going to be competitive. I'm sure that they still will be. Like, they had a really good record. So I feel like it's unfair to totally write them off. But I'm not sure. I think it's going to take them longer now to find their footing again.
You both have said some really good things. Nick, you were talking about how DeAndre Ayton isn't a solid number 2, and I agree with you completely. And I just don't think that they're going to be back anytime soon. Like, a lot of things went the same way. And Kayla, you weren't being patronizing, because I feel the exact same way. Like, I genuinely feel bad for Chris Paul. Like, he's 37 years old. You don't get these many opportunities. This is his first time this far, and he's 37 now, and they lost. And it's it's also the way they lost. They lost 4 straight games. They're up 2-0. It was games that like the Bucks should not have won in games 3 or 4. Booker dropped 42 games in a row, and they still lost. That kind of thing does not leave a player's mind, especially a veteran like him who knows how the NBA works. To me, I don't think he's getting another chance. I think that's kind of it. He might go to like another team and be on the bench for a while, but I think for Chris Paul, that's pretty much it. And for the Phoenix Suns in general, you are right in the fact that Devin Booker put a lot of people on notice, which is good for him. And maybe that's like we were talking about earlier, the small market. Maybe they're going to get even bigger free agent to come to Phoenix to help out Devin Booker, to come, help out DeAndre Ayton. But I think the Suns will be good in due time. But they have a really solid bench. They actually have a lot of young guys. They had like Mikal Bridges and Cameron Payne, who's a cast off from the Bulls, and he's been a big points during the series. So I think the Suns will be a little bit, but I think they'll be back eventually.
Well, I'm fascinated to get an understanding, and I think we'll know later on this summer where Chris Paul feels like this organization is, because that's going to be a big determining factor for him at 37 years old. He's going to go where he thinks that he can win a championship, and whether he thinks that that is in Phoenix or not remains to be seen. And I think that will tell you a lot about how he feels about the organization, the coaching staff, and the players. Not to say that he hasn't had an outstanding tenure in the 1 year there and building the relationships. You could see tangibly the impact that he had on that roster. I mean, they were night and day better after the momentum that they were able to create in the bubble and then carry it through all this season. I mean, they had an outstanding year, but at the same time, it is fair to question about how much of a contender this team can be when other big teams in the West are going to get healthy relatively quickly. So we will see how he feels on that. But if Chris Paul were to not come back, I think that is a devastating blow for Phoenix, because it's not only that you lose a star, you lose a special kind of star with the basketball IQ and the way that Chris Paul plays, which is so unselfishly, it is very difficult to replicate. You're not saying, okay, I'm losing Devin Booker, and Devin Booker, make no mistake, is a better player than Chris Paul is right now. I'm not trying to make that argument, but Devin Booker would be, I would say, more easily replaced in that way because, okay, I'll go trade for Damian Lillard. And it's not the same one-for-one trade, but there are guys out there that can do to a limited degree what Devin Booker can do in terms of scoring the basketball. I think Damian Lillard is a comparable player in that way. But Chris Paul is a guy who is just incredibly smart in a basketball IQ sense, and the leadership and everything that he brought to their organization as an unselfish player. The guys who play point guard the way Chris Paul does are fewer and farther between as the NBA has gone along the last 5 to 10 years. And that is not someone that you are able to just plug and play from the next free agent that's out there. So if Chris Paul doesn't return, it's going to be really difficult for them to replicate, at least in my opinion.
No, and I think that's an absolutely fair, observation. I think that Chris Paul's, his experience and his leadership is what he brings to a team more than any of his actual skills. I think that, the type of vitality that he can, just bring into a team and the energy and just the overall confidence, because he's played so long, he knows so much, that you have a leader like him in charge of your team as your point guard. I think that calming effect and that sort of intangible is something that nobody else is really going to bring to the table, not in the same way that he does. And so that's what makes him so valuable. Not necessarily, like we said, that he's the best scorer, he's the best guy on the team. He is not, but he has something about him. There's such an intangible presence with him that it elevates him as a player and as a person. And he's someone that people want to work with. Nobody hates, well, I guess I don't know that for a fact, but anyone that I think I've heard, nobody hates working with Chris Paul.
Very well respected around the league. Yeah.
He is very dependent. And so dependable, I think.
Dependable.
I think that he's somebody that teams look for his veteran experience. And so it would be a massive blow to Phoenix because, like we said, I don't know that they're going to get someone like that again.
Chase, before we go to break, where does Phoenix go if Chris Paul is not back next year?
They go further down the rankings. They really do. Chris Paul is like Kayla said it, he's the heart and soul of that team. All it took was their roster is pretty similar to what it was last year in the bubble. Chris Paul shows up, boom. The final, it takes one guy who can really. I think the hardest part of any sports program is making people really buy into what they're doing. They completely bought into Chris Paul. They bought into Monty Williams, and Monty Williams and Chris Paul have been, have respect for each other since the New Orleans days. So I genuinely just don't think if Phoenix loses Chris Paul, it would be devastating. It'd be an understatement.
Giannis delivering the first title to the Bucks in 50 years. Phoenix in a bit of trouble to try and get back to where they just were. And on the other side, can the Yankees continue their strong start to the second half? And how did the Mets hang on to their first place lead? That's next. Stay with us right here on One on One. Back here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show, coming at you on a Wednesday night up until 10 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to get into some Major League Baseball, and no one better to join us right now than Ryan Gregware, our WFUV Sports Yankees beat reporter, who is live from Yankee Stadium. Ryan, how's it going out there?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. When I was presented with this opportunity, I ran with it. Can never turn down a chance like this. So excited to talk some Yankees with you guys.
Absolutely. And I'm thrilled that you were able to come on too, because I miss seeing you. So it's good to be able to see you. But let's get into at least what you've seen tonight so far, and then we'll go from there. But how great is Greg Allen right now?
Greg Allen is unbelievable. I just said this right before we got on the air, but there's been no player I've ever seen win over a fan base as quickly as Greg Allen has won over the New York Yankees fan base. Again today, a huge RBI double to tie things at 2. Still the score right now. We're in the top of the 6, so we'll see what happens there. But Greg Allen's been unbelievable. In every win in the second half, there has been a Greg Allen moment. So it's just fun stories like this in the middle of the year that make me really appreciate baseball.
Ryan, I'm kind of upset with you. I mean, the Yankees are playing my Phillies right now. So this is a challenge for me because I don't like Greg Allen. He has not won me over. So I personally am unhappy with the spark that he's apparently given the Yankees. I mean, how is that random? Like, it's so crazy. They were just in such desperate need, I feel like, of somebody who brought such energy and such, like, he clearly just wants to be there. And I feel like that's something that maybe the Yankees have been lacking a little bit. I mean, obviously you're this ultimate fan and the beat reporter, so correct me if I'm wrong. But I feel like it's something that they've been like desperately searching for right now.
No, yeah. I hear some cheering in the background. We'll see what's going on there. But what I love about Greg Allen and all these kind of new guys that have come up as the Yankees have had these injuries and the COVID issue is they're playing for their jobs, literally. Greg Allen might not have gotten another chance anywhere else. He needed breaks to go his way. They called up 5 other guys before Greg Allen was called up. So to have him, to have a Ryan Lamar, to have a Florial, who these guys are playing for their big league careers right now, I think it is nice. And I think you see that energy they provide, stealing bases, giving your 110%. Ryan Lamar had a really good quote after Sunday Night Baseball, that win against the Red Sox, where he said, he got hurt crashing through the wall. And he said, there was no way I was coming out of this game. You don't get many chances to play for the Yankees. You better run with it when you get one. So I think that sense of urgency and what they're playing with right now, it's certainly what has allowed them to kind of rattle off some wins here in the second half while they are depleted. That's for sure.
I'm curious if you'll agree with me here, Ryan, because the infusion of the energy in some of the guys who are replacing the COVID players, the guys who are out with COVID and some of the injuries as well, reminds me a little bit of 2019 and that next man up mentality. Now, of course, this is not a team that has played anywhere near as well as 2019 did, but just that infusion of energy and a spark that a guy like Cameron Maybin and Mike Ford were able to bring, Mike Tauchman in 2019, to see Greg Allen and some of those guys come up and be able to infuse that. Rougned Odor has really come around as a leader on this team too, and a guy who a lot of the players like playing with, in addition to some of the guys that they're waiting to get back. To me, the question remains, are they going to be able to hit enough? Because that, to me, is the big situation here and where they've struggled in a way that 2019, they hit the second most home runs in baseball history in 19. And that was guys coming up with big power. And there was a lot of talk about the baseballs and there's a bunch of stuff that has been changed this year here into 2021. But they've gotten the pitching to a point where has it been outstanding all the time? No. But they're pitching well enough to where they are comfortable for their original expectations for this offense. They're meeting their pitching expectations, save for maybe a few struggles in the bullpen. But this is a team that's got to find a way to hit. I mean, they are playing better baseball, but they won't be able to sustain it if they can't hit.
Yeah, and the reason that it's the only difference from 2019 is it's not as fun because they need to win these games. There's not like a nice cushion. That 19 team won the division. They pretty much ran away with it from early on in the year. This team, they have to play well. They can't have a week where they kind of, go on a rut here. And for sure, it's on the hitting. The pitching, I think, going into the year was the question mark. And I think it's given you everything you could have asked for. You really don't have much behind Cole. Tyone stepped it up recently in the last 11 starts. The starter's ERA is 2.15. We've seen other stretches in the season where it's been really dominant. So I think on the pitching side of things, you would have taken what you've gotten so far. It's all in the hitting. It's all in the situational, runners in scoring position. Even in a nice win yesterday, they went over 7 with runners in scoring position. So it's going to come down to that. And if these guys who don't have track records right now are able to lift a boost, a guy like Gleyber Torres, who he had a home run tonight, he has 3 in the second half. He had 3 in the whole first half. So if you're able to get the offense picked up, which, it looks solid early on. We'll see, obviously, if that continues. I think that really it will come down to the offense. And it's a good question if they can kind of get back to the expectations and is there positive regression coming? Because a lot of the overwhelming analytics say there is regression coming, with runners in scoring position in particular. That's, I think, the question that will make or break the Yankees season for sure, Nick.
I have a question, too, for you, Ryan. So with Greg Allen and with Florial, where do you see these guys going once this COVID so COVID has obviously ravaged the Yankees, but what's going to happen after that? When those guys return, when they're back, they're healthy, what happens to Greg Allen and Florial? Like, where are they going to go? Are the Yankees going to keep them if they're performing well? Or are they going to just dump them because they have their starters back?
It's a great question. I actually tried to do the math in my head and stuff early on in this game. I was writing out the list of players that were these next man up because the math doesn't work in their favor. It doesn't. A guy like Tyler Wade, who has been here the most of the year, He can beat Ahmed out. You're going to have to send down multiple of these guys that are in the lineup right now. It's just the reality of the situation, right? Obviously, you welcome back an Aaron Judge or Shoa Voigt who's injured. No questions about that. So 3 guys there, and there's not really 3 clear spots. I think Ryan Lemaire. I'm not sure how the options are, but for sure they're going to have probably a guy like Greg Allen. He's going to stay if he hits. I think that's the bottom line. So these guys can't worry about that. And if Florial's going 2 for 4 with a homer like he did last night, they will be fine. But it's going to come down to who's just not producing at that moment. It's a pretty self-explanatory kind of situation here.
Ryan, I'll send you out on this one and then get back to your duties as the beat reporter for WFUV Sports covering the Yankees tonight in a 2-2 ball game. Phillies and Yanks trying to improve their hot start in the second half. This is a team that we talked about the hitting, and it's not as though it's been all bad, but very inconsistent. In your eyes, how do they find some of that consistency to get on the run that everybody knows that they need to go on to be in a spot to make the playoffs or potentially contend for the division? I think that might be a little out of reach for them at this point, but how do they go on that run that everyone's talking about with the bats when things have been so inconsistent? Because it hasn't been all bad, but on the whole, it just hasn't been enough. And one game you're scoring 7, the next game you're scoring 2, and they haven't been able to find any consistency with which they're hitting with runners in scoring position and elsewhere.
Right, and the inconsistency drives you crazy because the way that they need to get better is just look at the back of the baseball card. Look at DJ LeMahieu's last few Yankee years. Look at Gleyber Torres' 38 homer year. Stanton, he's been fine. A little bit of a slump now. Garrett, they just need to play what they're capable of, and that's why it's frustrating because it's not like these guys are, unproven and it's not a great team. We know what the Yankees can be at full strength. We know what these specific players can be when they're at their best, and none of them really are. So I think, it's a hard answer because you have to kind of just snap out of it and get hot. And I think what we've seen from Gleyber Torres, these 5 games, it's been really encouraging, seeing the power back. So you're going to need these guys to simply just play like they're capable of. Maybe you go in the deadline, maybe you acquire a bat elsewhere, whatever. But these guys can play better, and that's what it's going to come down to. DJ LeMahieu, while he's having, he's probably been like a league average hitter, that's a huge drop-off from leading the league in average last year and being top 2 in hits the last 2 years. So it's going to come down just these guys playing like they're capable of.
Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. We'll get you out of here.
Anytime. Just a quick, I don't know if you guys heard in the background, ton of screaming and stuff. Yankees had a challenge. It overturned in their favor. So 2-2, 6th inning. We'll keep an eye on that one. But thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we'll keep on it, and we'll see if the Yankees can get things going tonight and then into the future as the second half progresses. And I thought Ryan nailed it because it's all about the finding of consistency for the Yankees, especially with the offense, because it's in there. Gary Sanchez is a guy who has come on and actually played particularly well throughout the end of the first half and into the second, but his hitting is in there, and Giancarlo Stanton, a former MVP, is in there, and of course Judge out of the lineup right now, and some of the injury issues that they've had with Luke Voigt and Giovanni Urshela not available to them right now, and some of the other injuries, Aaron Hicks, who came out earlier in the season with the injury and they lost him for the year. But I'm just interested to see how this team can right the ship because it's been tough, undeniably difficult for them to find a way to get things going with the bats because pitching-wise, as I mentioned, I feel like they've done a job that is good enough. Now, has it been the best pitching staff in the American League? No, but that's not what they needed because they had an offense that they could fall back on, and that just hasn't been the case for them this summer at all.
No, it really hasn't. I mean, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but just the sustainability of their success. Can this continue? I mean, the Yankees have really been all over the place just since the All-Star break, just throughout this entire season in general. And so I think that, like you said, I mean, their offense is not consistent. Can they get things going? And, is it enough for the rotation to be helping them out? I think that this is a Yankee season that is just, fraught with trouble because it seems like everywhere you go, if you got something right, if it felt like you fixed one problem, another one just arises. And it just seems like for the Yankees, they're just constantly in this like spiral of correcting and then failing at something and missing something and then trying to correct that. And it just kind of just keeps going for them. And so I think that this season is incredibly frustrating, and like just to see it all continue to go wrong and then go right, and your hopes are all over the place here. So I think that Ryan did a great job. Obviously, I love speaking with him. He's such a fan. You can hear his passion in his voice. And so I think that it'll just be interesting to see how this team works to correct all of these offensive problems.
Yeah, it's tough to get a read on what team is going to show up which night, because really struggled first couple series against Boston, felt like you had it corrected against Seattle, and in a series earlier against Minnesota, but a couple of heartbreaking losses there. The Angels, you feel like, okay, they've got a game that's right there and out in front of them to win with your closer in with a 4-run lead. And after a rain delay, the game-tying grand slam, and eventually losing that game as well. So just a really difficult team to get a read on, and we'll see how things progress. But you know they're capable, and that is the part to me that sticks out. It is a team that has the run in them. Now, are they going to be able to bring that out? And I think that a lot of that is tied to the health and the COVID situation as well, because as much energy as some of these guys who are coming up have brought, it's not going to be enough and will not sustain the Yankees going forward into the playoffs for the rest of the summer. So they're going to need to find some of those big guns back, and Aaron Judge can't come back soon enough. And maybe some of these younger guys or the minor leaguers are the infusion of energy that they need for the big guns to come back and get in a better place in the batter's box. But we'll see as the summer goes along, and time will tell on the story of the 2021 Yankees. Flip over just a moment. We've got a couple of minutes here before we have to go to break again. But the Mets at first place, it is an odd time in New York sports because the Yankees are scuffling and the Mets are in first place in the NL East. But a team that has also been inconsistent at times, have found a way to string enough wins in an NL East that has not been anywhere near as good as we thought coming into the season. But they have done enough, been playing 4-6 baseball over their last 10, a couple of difficult losses, a couple of very good wins, a similar team to the Yankees in terms of some of the inconsistency. But the thing that you'll bet on for the Mets that always travels is that starting pitching. And they've got 3 starters at the top of that rotation that are really getting things done, in a bat and bats and the lineup that is coming around enough to where you feel like, save for some of the issues with the bullpen and some of the inconsistency with the hitting, this is a team that could carry this thing into the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Stroman today was incredible. He went for, I think it was 8 innings. He allowed 1 hit. The Mets won 7-0 against the Reds. I mean, that's what they really have needed out of their starters. I think maybe last game it was Robert Stock. He got out in the first inning. He was injured. And so I think that for them, like, they needed this longevity of their starting pitchers, because their bullpen has just been in a carousel recently, just constantly coming. And there's just a massive string of people, and everyone is kind of getting a couple of pitches in. And it just feels like that it can only lead to downfall eventually. You can't rely on your bullpen all that much. You can't just have a carousel constantly. And so today, I think for Marcus Stroman to go for so long and to really pull out such a great performance, only allowing 1 hit, I think that it's that type of pitching, and it is their rotation that's going to keep them in this, because once they start sort of relying more on this bullpen and kind of letting their starting pitching slip, that's where they're going to see problems. That's their saving grace right now. And so I definitely think for them, obviously, as a Phillies fan, I don't want them to continue to stay in first place. And I think it's possible that the Phillies can take them. For them to try to hold on to that, I mean, there's still so much of the season to go. But for them to hold on to that, it's really going to be about maintaining that starting pitching and then hoping that your offense will catch up.
And it's also the injury issues with some of the Mets as well. Jacob deGrom on the IL once again, and a guy who has been so good for them when he's been able to pitch, but that has at times been a little bit fewer and farther between than they would like, with some of the injury issues that he has had to endure throughout this season. So we will see what happens with his health and how things progress with the Mets. A team that to me is a little bit like the Yankees, though the pressure not on them as heavily because of the way that the rest of the division has played, and the Yankees in a tough spot in the American League East that has seen Boston get off to a great start, and Toronto and Tampa Bay as well, really tough customers in the rest of that division. And it's not to say that the NL East doesn't have some of that, but those teams have not lived up to that potential so far this summer. Very interesting to see the Braves struggle as much as they have, a team that was a win away from the World Series last year. And I think a number of people's picks to potentially get back to the World Series this year have really not been able to find their footing. So the Mets taking advantage and seeing if they can get healthy, find that consistency. I think that's the name of the game for New York baseball right now. It's the consistency, because some of these, both these teams have been up and down. They've got a number of good things going for them now, trying to round that into form for a playoff push. And of course, the trade deadline can help you find some of that consistency. So we'll see which moves are made as things go along in the upcoming week plus. We got to go to break. Latest on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Is it finally time to think about Rodgers suiting up in another uniform next fall? We'll discuss that next. Stay with us right here on One on One. Back here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on a Wednesday night, final half an hour. Nick DeLuca here with you, Kayla Wenzel, Chase Doyen, Alex Woles, our producer, keeping us on Twitter tonight. Got to get into some football. And Aaron Rodgers, the latest on the Green Bay Packers saga. Of course, it reported this week that he turned down a very lucrative contract extension to stay with Green Bay that would have tied him to the Packers for the foreseeable future. And we had some talk a couple weeks ago about what was the feud really about. Is it about the money, the respect? Can we get inside Aaron Rodgers' head here a little bit and get an understanding of what is his thought process? And very interesting to me anyway, that it seems as though it's really not about the money or the security, but really about a broken trust between Rodgers and the front office, because it seems as though his relationship with Matt LaFleur has been very good, but the front office and their willingness to do business with Rodgers has not come to fruition. And I do think it is, at least at this point, maybe the phrasing of will he play in another uniform a bit premature, but will he play in a Packers uniform, I think is a more realistic question, because is this a guy who would think about not playing this year? I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I think is hard for me to imagine, is that I can see it not being about the money. I can see it being about the trust and loyalty within the organization. I understand that and I get that. But the problem, I think, for Aaron Rodgers is that he doesn't really have many cards to play here. Like, he's kind of at the mercy of what his organization wants to do. And so I think for him, it's really about, does he want to play football right now? Because I think that's kind of the options that he's looking at here. He either sits out this season. Training camp, I think, starts soon next week. And so he either doesn't go and he sits out entirely, or he sucks it up and he goes to the Packers, And so I think really what's on the line for him is playing football, because I don't really see a situation where the Packers are going to trade him. They haven't said so yet. They don't plan on doing that whatsoever. So if he's just going to sit, then that's going to be up to him, they're not going to drag him to practice. They can't make him come. And so if he chooses not to, then it's him who doesn't get to play football this season, and it's him kind of who ends up screwed. So he may not, the money doesn't seem like it really means anything to him. It really just seems to be the culture and the loyalty. And that's not changing anytime soon. And it doesn't seem like the Packers are interested in letting him go anytime soon.
No, not at all. This seems to me clearly like a grown man who does not want to be there at all. Like, you're telling me that he's declining one of the biggest contracts in NFL history to not play for Green Bay even a little bit. It just, I think I agree with you, Kayla. I think he just doesn't want to play football anymore. I think he really just he may have just lost his edge for it. Like, you see him all the time in media nowadays doing the match with Brady. He's engaged to Shailene Woodley now. It seems like he's living more like a celebrity.
He hosted Jeopardy. We can't forget that place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, how could I forget? But no, it seems like he just doesn't. If I had to think about it, I just think he doesn't want to be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers anymore, or just even a quarterback in general. Like, his relationship with LaFleur has been very up and down since LaFleur got hired. I mean, it has gotten better, but that's only because they've made actually kind of a decent run. And then, the Jordan Love thing is waiting in the midst, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. But if he sits out, I think he's retiring. I don't see any team making a play for him at his age. I think he still has a good couple of years left in him, but I don't see any other team making a play for him when there's quarterbacks aplenty in next year's draft and draft after that, and the draft after that.
I don't know that I would be that cavalier in saying that there wouldn't be a market for him. I mean, he's Aaron Rodgers, and I understand that there are quarterbacks that are available, but those guys aren't Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's a guy who just won the MVP and had as good a season as we've seen out of a quarterback in a long time. To me, the roadblock is, again, the contract, because when you break down the numbers, he is owed, let's see here, it's a base salary of just under $15 million, but the important number to pay attention to here is the dead cap hit, because that's what Green Bay is on the hook for, very limited salary cap against their cap should he not be on their roster. This year, it's $37 million. With the environment in the NFL, with the way the cap situations are going, there is no way that the Green Bay Packers can afford to say we can pay Aaron Rodgers $37 million against our cap to not play for us. Now, they are likely better off allowing him to just stay on the roster and remain there and just not play, because his cap hit is a little bit lower. It would save them about $2 million or so to let him literally just be inactive for every game and just chill out and suit up Jordan Love for every game that you play this fall. So the only way that Aaron Rodgers gets moved, and this is similar to a Carson Wentz situation with the contract and sending him to the Colts, what the Eagles were willing to do was work with him on restructuring the contract to make it one that the Colts could take on. That's not going to happen with Green Bay. They are a team that has their feet firmly dug in the sand and are saying, no, we're going to keep you, Aaron, and you're going to stay here. And to me, that's why I rephrased some of that question, at least coming into this segment, because I don't know that it's about, will he play in another uniform? Because I don't think that's going to happen. What I do think is more likely or could happen is that he would somehow sit out this season. However, I think it's difficult for him to do that too, because he's 38 years old and he had a great year and he's a good athlete. And I think quarterbacks and Tom Brady have shown you that you can play for a little while, but at the same time, you're still 38, 39 years old. And that's not a spot where when you feel like you are at the top of your game, you want to say, I'm going to take a year off. That's a tough spot for him to be in. So as much as has been made about this whole situation, and I think that it is legitimate, and I do not believe that he wants to play for Green Bay anymore, I think his hand is going to be forced, because I don't think he's in a spot where at 38 years old, he'll be happy saying, yeah, I just won't play this year.
I agree totally with that, Nick. I think that this ends poorly for Aaron Rodgers. I don't see it going in his favor whatsoever, because like you said, I think he's stuck. It feels like a game of chicken to me, and it's like, who's going to bulk first? And I think that he's going to be the one who ends up screwed here, because the Packers organization they're not backing down whatsoever. So I think that if he wants to play football, which like you said, he probably does, he's a competitor. I can't imagine that he is just going to walk away from it just totally okay with that, acting like nothing has happened and like he didn't have a really great season last year. And I think that it's going to be impossible. It's going to be, okay, not maybe impossible, but incredibly challenging for him to sit on the bench of the Packers this entire season and watch Jordan Love take a spot. I don't think that he's going to be able to handle that. And I think that the competitor inside of him is going to have to come out. And that's why I think he's going to end up playing just for the Packers, because I think that his pride, and while because it's not about money, right? So it's got to be about like character, loyalty, pride. I think that it's going to take such a massive hit if he just sits there and watches his team where they're not letting him go. So if they're not letting him go, he's either got to run with them or like sit against them. You know what I mean? Like, I think that he has no choice really but to go with what the Packers want.
Not going against, but kind of piggybacking what you said about pride. I mean, think about people who are on the opposite side of like the Aaron Rodgers hype train. I personally am a big fan of him as a quarterback. He only has one ring. So there's probably a part of him somewhere out there that thinks to himself, I only have a couple more years left. You said he's a true competitor. Why not run it? I think it has something to do with loyalty. It probably has a lot to do with Jordan Love. So I kind of changed my tune a little bit. I think he really does want to play football, but he's kind of in a bind, but it's a self-imposed bind. Like Green Bay's given him nothing but like success and love. And yeah, they only had like one ring, but then again, he's never had like a first round talent besides like Devontae Adams, but still, I think he'll play genuinely.
I don't disagree, but yeah, I'm a little down on Aaron Rodgers with this whole situation in that I don't love the way he's handled it, to tell you the truth. And there are some who think that he is at the liberty of the respect of the organization that he plays for, and there is some legitimacy to that. I'll buy that in that he is owed some of that respect that should be given to a quarterback of his caliber. But the idea that Green Bay has held him back every step of the way, I just don't believe is true. And he plays in a small market, yes. The Green Bay is never going to go out and spend a ridiculous amount of money in free agency. But they have invested in their roster. They're a team that doesn't have a lot of salary cap space left. They're not a team that's saying we're going to try and budget our money to save 20% of the salary cap or something like that. They're a team that is up against the cap with Aaron Rodgers almost every year. They've paid Aaron Rodgers. They've shown they're willing to pay him even further into the future and to say, yeah, we probably shouldn't have drafted Jordan Love, or we think that you can now play further into your career than we might have anticipated when we made that pick. But the idea that Green Bay has done wrong by Aaron Rodgers every step of the way, I don't think is true. He's got a top 5, if not top 2, if not top 1 wide receiver in Davante Adams. Are we supposed to care that he was drafted in the second round? I mean, yeah, he wasn't drafted in the first round. That's what everyone likes to latch onto. They haven't drafted a first-round skill position player since he's been there. Davante Adams makes it so you don't have to draft another wide receiver. They've got Aaron Jones, a guy who is a top-flight running back. He was just up for free agency, and they paid him. So I understand that it hasn't been perfect, but it's the NFL. Very few things are. It's difficult to be perfect. Vince Lombardi said that. So I'm just not with Aaron Rodgers being this victim here in that, he's got nowhere else to turn. Yeah, they drafted Jordan Love. And you know what? You played so well that it doesn't matter anymore. They're willing to cut ties with Jordan Love and say, you're our guy for the foreseeable future. We'll roll with you until you're 43 years old. And the fact that he turns that down, that's on him as far as I'm concerned, because I don't know what he wants. I don't know what he's looking for, but this is a situation that, for me, I think makes him look bad. I mean, does anyone sit here and talk about how poorly the Packers are run? Maybe there's some of that, but I think this is on Aaron Rodgers in the way that he's handled the situation, and I don't think it's in a good way.
I agree, and I think that the trend that we've really seen, like in this past football season, more than I think I've ever realized before, is quarterbacks kind of feeling like they are owed something by their organizations. Like we saw with like Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, and they sort of all feel like they have this entitlement to the front office. And on the one hand, I feel like that is sort of true, and that obviously your quarterback is your star person and that they're somebody who's a leader on your team and you should like think of them. But ultimately, they're not the front office. So I feel like their decisions are separate from one another, although they obviously affect each other. I don't know how entitled a quarterback can be to be upset about decisions that front office makes. Unfortunately, like as the way football works and as the way all sports work, you are just an employee on their team. Like you're a paid employee. You are not the boss. And so as the employee, you got to go with what your boss tells you to do. And I think that people like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers have been with a company or whatever, a team so long that they feel like they get to make the decisions. And unfortunately, it's just not how it works for them. And it's suddenly like this season, it was a surprise. Surprise, they don't have all the power. And it was like confusing to all of them. And now it's like blown up so much in the media and they're using it to their advantage to kind of try to garner sympathy. And I think you're right. I don't really have sympathy for Aaron Rodgers. So what? He sits out. He's still making millions on millions of dollars. You know what I mean? So for me personally, I agree that I think that these quarterbacks, especially in this recent season, are playing up this victim card and making it seem like they are being so mistreated when I know for a fact they are not, and they've got massive wallets to prove it. So I feel like I don't have a lot of sympathy for them.
No, I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. It's like, oh, geez, I have all these millions of dollars for my State Farm commercials. Oh, geez, I have all these endorsements. Oh, geez, I hang out with Miles Teller in Hawaii with my girlfriend. Like, it's just, I have no sympathy for him. Like, he's really kind of shown who he was. And there's always been rumors and like stuff about Aaron Rodgers, like locker room presence. He's been very cold, not really the best leader. He kind of leads with his play, but not who he is. And it kind of shows that. Like, he just, like you said, especially with the recent quarterback trends of entitlement, Aaron Rodgers slowly is kind of like taking the cake of one of the more entitled quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, I think you can argue because they never really gave him a lot of help and this and this and that, but you can also do that with Aaron Rodgers. So I don't feel bad for him. He's kind of dug himself into this hole and he'll unfortunately probably remain there for a while. So
I'll finish up with this before we end on this topic. I do understand why certain quarterbacks have complained in the ways that they have. And Deshaun Watson is the one that comes to mind, and we'll save all the other stuff that has gone on with him for another day. But just from the football side and perspective of things, the disaster that has been their front office with the way that they operated in trading away the first round picks and being a team that was as badly built as the Houston Texans were this year. I understand why Deshaun Watson, despite the millions of dollars, wants to get out of there, because they're letting a pastor run their football operation, and it just does not seem to be married to any rhyme or reason. And there are some organizations that, although Seattle, for example, has won a lot, they have really struggled to protect Russell Wilson. Now, I think that his complaints are a little overblown too, because he's had a lot of help, at least from a skill position standpoint, with wide receivers. But they have really struggled to protect him. They have not had much of a running game since he has been there. So those two things are noted. Aaron Rodgers has had almost everything at his disposal. Number one wide receiver, bona fide stud in Devontae Adams, a top 5, top 10 running back in Aaron Jones, and an offensive line that has been really good. They have done an excellent job of building to protect Aaron Rodgers over the last 5 years or so. And to me, at that level, you go 4-12 routinely and you have no future in sight. Okay, I understand why Deshaun Watson makes the play that he does. But you were just in the NFC Championship game back-to-back years and went 13-3. And by the way, one of the reasons you weren't in the Super Bowl was because of some difficult decisions in the second half that I know everyone points to the field goal, but there was some not so great play from Aaron Rodgers there too. And that game was messy for a time, but I'm at a point with Aaron Rodgers where I would say you might want to relax. I don't want to turn that on him, but you might want to relax a little bit, because it's a tough play to make. So we got to go to break again. We will check in with the latest across the Pacific with the 2021 Olympics underway from Tokyo. That's next for our final segment right here on One on One. Final 10 minutes here on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Nick DeLuca, Kayla Wenzel, Chris Doyen, and Alex Walls, our producer, keeping us on the air. Did I say Chris? I meant Chase.
Chris is my brother's name, so that's why it's kind of funny to me.
So I'm like your parents calling you Chris.
Pretty much. It's one of the weirdest times of my life.
My goodness.
Yeah.
It's Chase Doyen. He's still here with us, not his brother. So that's a good thing. But we got to get into the Olympics underway in Tokyo 2021. Big takeaway for me, the women's soccer team dropping a 3-0 opening match to Sweden to kick things off this afternoon. But just interested to get your guys' reaction with everything going on. There's a lot of COVID and a situation there that has created some uncertainty. Of course, no spectators, which is odd, I think, for those of us in the United States where things have really progressed back to relatively normal with the COVID situation with sporting events. So that will be a challenge again for the athletes competing. And then just taking a look ahead at a number of things, I'm interested to see how baseball's return to the Olympics goes, to see how softball plays as well. It's been a little while for that. And the U.S. men's basketball team, which has struggled a bit in their opening exhibition games in a way that we have not seen very recently, and to see if they can get things back on track.
You know what's funny, Nick? You picked all of the mainstream type of sports and you're like, that's what I'm excited to see. But I'm going to come at you totally different. I want to see all of the random sports that you never hear about. There's this one where they do gymnastics with ribbons and they dance in sync. I wish I could remember what it was actually called, but I'm really excited to see that. I love synchronized diving. What an interesting concept for a sport. You have to dive at the exact same time. And surfing. This is the first time surfing has ever been in the Olympics. And I think that that's going to be super exciting. So I'm definitely interested in the more obscure sports, but just in general, with the COVID stuff, the testing is rigorous out there. It is in a totally different world. I know the women's gymnastics team, they're not even staying in the Olympic Village. They've opted to stay in a hotel together in Tokyo to kind of keep their team just close and isolated away from other athletes in the Olympic Village. And so I think that, and Tokyo's numbers are really high. I think they're in their fourth national emergency or something. So it does feel it feels off with everything that's going on. There are no fans and Tokyo is having such a crisis right now. But yet, here are the Olympics and here's the U.S. women's gymnastics team coming out. So it definitely feels a little out of place just with everything that's going on in Tokyo. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to get it off. 71 participants have already tested positive for COVID. So it feels like it's a downhill spiral and we're kind of just waiting for doomsday again with all of this. But I don't know. I really love the Olympics. The Summer Olympics are my favorite. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it. But also I recognize that within this midst of COVID, it is probably not the best idea.
No, it's not the best idea at all. To me, it kind of feels like it's almost inevitable in a way because only more people are going to keep testing. And, I wasn't on board with the obscure sports until you mentioned it because I also love synchronized diving. I think it's so interesting to watch.
Right?
And it's kind of something that I hope that it goes well. I hope they kind of get this COVID thing under control. I hope that the more obscure sports get their limelight. I don't know if badminton is there. I've always been a big badminton guy. So I
think
hope
it is there.
See, there you go. That's something more interesting I'm in before. But I guess we'll have to see. But it's only getting worse, I feel like. And it's the Olympics so close. It's just I feel like there's been more cases. And I genuinely just don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to monitor just how things go because it is a bit of a different environment and not sure exactly what the vaccination numbers are there and how available that is to the citizens there in Tokyo. And then, of course, in turn, the rest of the world. That is some of the difficulty with this whole situation because, of course, from the American perspective, we are doing relatively well with the vaccination numbers compared to what things look like for the rest of the world. So to just keep all that in perspective and to monitor that as we go along will be certainly interesting. But assuming that the games do continue, I am interested in getting onto a few of those sports, and if that's what you're very interested in seeing in terms of the badminton and the synchronized diving, I'd love to get into that a little bit. But I will say I'm very curious to see how men's basketball is going to respond because a grueling playoffs. And this is not something that's new for a number of players who will come right over. In fact, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and Devin Booker are all on the same private jet off to Tokyo. So quite an interesting flight over the Pacific for the three of them. But as you get into some of that and the way that the guys who were on the floor had struggled a little bit and losing these exhibitions in a way that we have not been able to see those things in the past, I am just curious, is this a situation that we feel like is salvageable? Is Devin Booker going to come in and really be the difference, Chris Middleton as well? Or is this another year where the United States, because LeBron James has said he doesn't want to play, or the Chris Pauls of the world, and perhaps they don't have that national experience, that it might be a struggle for them in these upcoming Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, what a fast turnaround for those guys. I mean, like, Devin Booker, I think that's going to be something that's interesting. I mean, coming off such a devastating loss and now immediately going to Tokyo and hopefully doing well. And I mean, the men's national basketball team hasn't performed all that well. Didn't they lose to Australia and Nigeria like previously? So I don't know. Normally I would say that America is such a powerhouse of NBA basketball and that our American Olympics team is always such a strong competitor. But this year I really am not that confident in them. I'm not sure entirely that their team is going to be as strong as it has been in years past.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What, like, already lost Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine went home. Like, there's already lost two of their like big shooters, and I think it's because the NBA has become so international as of late. Like, they have like Luka for Slovenia, and they have like Jokic for, you know, whatever country he plays for. But the point is, like, there's just you know, there's so many other options for, you know, success for other teams. But I'm worried about the U.S. national team as well. Like, the exhibition games are like, they're like preseason games. They're just like gimme games, but they're worrying me as well. So
Nikola Jokic from Serbia.
Thank you. Yeah, I am. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Playing in the Olympics, however, that just reported a couple of weeks ago, so it's relatively recent, but he will not be playing in the Olympics. But yeah, no, I'm interested because it is again a situation where it's a little bit difficult for them to overcome, just because you're in such a quick fashion trying to figure out how these teams mesh together. Of course, a new coaching staff in there as well. Coach K not coaching the team this year. It's Greg Popovich who's in and has drawn some criticism from a number of places, and we'll see if they can get things back on track as they head into the Olympics. Of course, this basketball is a sport where sometimes when the stakes aren't that high, teams have tendencies to coast, and then when the lights shine a little bit brighter, they're able to turn on that proverbial switch and are able to go from there. So we'll see if the United States can do that. Also fascinated to see baseball's return. And I love some of the names that are being tossed around there, just former big leaguers. And, you know, Nick Martinez, a former Fordham guy who's in there as well. But just to be able to see that return is really interesting for me, and to see how it goes. I feel like that is going to be a very wide open field for the Olympic Games in a way that basketball traditionally hasn't been, but you never know, and it might be this year. So looking forward to seeing that. And guys, it's been a pleasure, but this is going to do it for us for One-on-One. If you missed any of today's segments, the show will be available on demand on the WFUV Sports YouTube channel right here on Twitter as well. The sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. The producer of today's show has been Alex Walls. For Kayla Wenzel and Chase Doyen, I'm Nick DeLuca. Thanks for hanging out with us. One-on-One, a production of WFUV Sports.